Hey there, welcome back to the Everyday Grief Podcast. I'm Dr. Anitra, the Everyday Grief Coach, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. If you're listening right now, it's because you're ready to dive into something that we all face, but don't always talk about: grief. But here's the thing: grief is not just something we have to get through, it's actually something that can transform us. Grief isn't something to rush through either. It's a chance to transform. Now, we often try to skip past the hard parts, the pain, but if we take the time to sit with it, grief can actually help us become the person we're meant to be. I want you to think of grief not as a roadblock, but as a gateway, a way into a deeper, more authentic version of yourself. Now, I want you to put that image in your mind of a gateway versus a roadblock. A roadblock means that it is something that's going to stop or stunt you, that you have to think strategically around how you get around it. But if you see it as a roadblock, you see it as stopping something, a flow of life. And I want to invite you to see grief as a gateway that will bring you into something more, a more true version of who you already are and who you are becoming. So we're going to talk about the story we've been telling ourselves. And I want you to think about the story you're telling yourself right now, especially about grief. Whether you've experienced a job loss, a personal loss, or some other kind of transition, that story that you're living in is shaping how you move through it. And I know it's not always easy to ask this when grief makes us feel small, unworthy, or stuck. But I want to ask yourself this question, and it's very important. Is that story really true? Is that story really true? Because the thing is, sometimes the stories that we are telling ourselves aren't ours. But asking yourself that question, is it really true, can be a game changer. At least it has been for me. It's helped me to stop the spiral of shame and step into a more powerful, authentic narrative. But let's be super clear. Just asking the question won't magically fix everything. Grief is still a process. It's about learning to live with loss, adapting, and becoming someone new along the way. And here's the thing, I want you to know that you don't have to walk into this new season or walk through this gateway that we're talking about by yourself. You don't have to do this alone. Our stories are really powerful. They shape how we move through life, how we relate to others, and how we see ourselves. And grief? Well, grief has this way of rewriting that story. But grief doesn't get to define your entire story. It's just a chapter. Yeah, it's a big one, but it's not the whole book. The problem is we often hide parts of our stories, don't we? We hold back because we're afraid of what others might think, afraid of losing our dignity, of losing face, afraid of feeling shame. We might even avoid sharing our grief because we didn't want to be vulnerable or judged. Now, I've been there. I've shared my grief story thinking it would open the door for understanding, for connection. But instead, I walked away feeling more isolated, more by myself. Maybe you've had the same experience. You've encountered that awkward silence, the blank stares. Sometimes you might get a look of disgust. You might feel like someone doesn't want anything to do with you because you don't fit into the way they saw you. You might even feel dismissed. Sometimes the responses that you get don't land the way you thought they would. And it makes you feel, it leaves you feeling like you have to go through this by yourself. But here's the truth I want you to hear. There's still a better way. What I'm inviting you to is a story where you embrace your grief instead of running from it. This journey isn't a path of weakness, it's a path of power. And that power comes from authentic storytelling. And in that place of authenticity, we have to talk about something that is also essential. It's a spiritual practice called lament. And in this age where so many only want to talk about what's good and not talk about the pain of life, and they make you feel like anything that doesn't feel like happiness and joy and prosperity is coming from a force and a source that is not God, I want you to reframe and then engage in this process of lament, because lament is biblical. Lament is part of every spiritual tradition. Lament allows you to have access to what's really going on inside of you. It is the truth about what's going on and allows you to construct a way of telling that story to yourself and to God. It gives you a way of understanding and stating, this is where I currently see myself, how I see you, God. And here's this complicated story of my reality. And I need you to shift it. I need a different story. And I'm confident that you, that is beyond and bigger than me, can change how I see it and the story itself, because I hold you in high regard. I thank you for who you are, and I thank you that you're going to give me the wisdom, the fortitude, the tools, the strategies, the sacred strategies to navigate my way through this. And that as I do, that you are with me in the results, in the life after. So that is how you construct a lament. And it is simply the sacred act of truth telling. It is saying, this hurts. This is real. And I need to feel this. And I need to get through this. Lament is often something that we skip over. We want to get to resurrection without our Gethsemanes. We want to get to our resurrection. We want to get to the liberatory promise, but we want to move past the cross, the fact that there was a body in a tomb. We don't want to acknowledge the painful parts of our everyday lives, but we want to appoint ways of seeing past it. But we've got to get clear that we've got to see it for what it really is. We can't skip over it. In a world that wants us to move past our pain, our experiences that are not always glorious and fun, and calling us to skip through a whole bed of poppies, we've got to acknowledge that sometimes we need to be with the grief that we're in. We're not always in a position to rush to recovery. So I want you to know that lament is essential. It's not about staying stuck in the sorrow. It's about acknowledging the hurt, allowing it to be felt, and honoring that it's happening, because that is what makes you human. When we skip lament, we bypass the truth of our grief. But when we sit with it, when we lament, we create a space for healing and hope to enter. So I want to talk with you now about how we begin to reclaim our power. When we're in grief, we can feel like we've lost control, like we have to have no say in how things are going. or where our lives are headed. It's so easy to feel powerless, like grief is writing the story for us. But here's the truth. Grief doesn't take your power away. Yes, grief shakes things up. Grief shakes us up. Yes, it challenges us, but it doesn't take away our agency, the ability to define our response and shape our future. You still have agency. You still have the ability to save yourself in the midst of your grief. Now, the power I'm talking about is not control, it's not manipulation or dominating others. It's the kind of power that comes from within. The power to define your own story, to move through grief with resilience and reclaim your narrative from the place of your own strength. This is where Monica Coleman's insights, Monica A. Coleman, who writes wonderfully on agency in her book, Making a Way Out of No Way. And this is when it becomes important when we talk about agency. She talks about the ability to make decisions in the midst of chaos and to act in a way that honors what you're going through. And I want you to think about how agency gives you the ability to honor your grief without letting it define you. Agency is about taking responsibility for your own healing and saying, this is my grief, and I'm going to honor it. I'm going to see it. But it doesn't get to write the entire story of my life. It is not permanent. Remember, like I said before, it is a chapter in the larger narrative that is your life, the chapter of your book. And here's the thing. Sometimes we get tempted into manipulating our grief story. We may find ourselves telling the story in ways that gets us the reaction we want from others. We want them to say certain things, to feel certain things, to respond in a particular way. And in doing that, we risk disregarding their agency, their ability to respond authentically in our grief, to our grief, and the resources they have to offer. So sometimes it is the case that we've been telling ourselves our story in a particular way, and we want a particular response for our particular friends, and it's just not going to happen because each person has the capacity to be resourceful, to be a source of emotional support, but in a way that they define. So tell your story authentically. You don't need to have any attachments to how they're going to respond. Tell your story. So we want to be able to tell that story authentically without demanding or controlling the reactions of others. When they look at you with that blank stare, let it be blank. When they look at you and they don't have a response that is emotionally connective, that's really about them, it's not about you. Don't try to correct your story, to try to soften it, or to respond in a way that lets them know that you are disappointed with how they're responding. No, use what you're seeing as data to inform how you're going to be with that person. Maybe that's not a place of deep trust. And yes, that is going to feel disappointing that you cannot authentically share your story with that person, though you long for you yearn for their connection, you anticipated their connection, but they're not giving that to you. You just learned something important about that person. Maybe they also are experiencing some level of pain and they don't want to add to your story. Maybe that person is not at a place of maturity emotionally to add to your story. But I don't want you to back away just yet. Let the story sit. Don't expect the immediate response for that person. Let the story sit. See how they respond, not as a test, not as I thought they were my ride or die, or I thought they were going to be gentle and do a particular thing that you thought they were going to do. Let the story sit. However that has landed, let it be. Have no expectation. And the way you get to be that way in the company of others is by working on yourself before you get there. This is the work that we're doing together in this podcast, right? Because the hope is that you're able to regard their agency, to allow them to respond authentically to our grief, to our stories, and that you're able to guard the way that they can be a resource or not. So we grieve with authenticity. We don't demand or control the reactions of others. Let people meet us where we are without expectation. And when we do that, that's when we engage in real healing. Because moving out of ourselves and sharing the story, that's when we really begin to do the process of healing. And you might think that you want and you need a reaction from someone else in order to deepen the experience of connection. But the connection may already be there in the way that you're conveying your story, conveying your truth. However they respond, you're still in the winning column because you are healing with your stories. We don't heal in secrets. We don't heal when we keep everything to ourselves. We heal as we share, as we build community, because someone else may have needed you to tell that story. And they may not tell it to you right now, but they may come to you later and tell you how important it was that you told that story because it evoked something. It provoked them to respond to their own lives differently. And in the crevices of their soul, they're being shaped and changed because you decided to tell your story. So don't run away from the response that isn't what you thought it was going to be. Don't try to control how they respond, but be present to this messiness of the middle of this part of your life. When we step into our agency in grief, we also make space for others to bring their own resources. Like I said, it's their presence, it's their compassion, and it's their wisdom into the conversation. But again, you may or may not experience any and all those things. But you're building up resilience. You're building up the capacity for community. And you're building up a future self that grows in the midst of adversity. Now that we have acknowledged the grief, sat with it in lament, and reclaimed our power, we need to shift our perspective on grief. It's so easy for grief to feel like it's all-consuming, like it's the defining chapter of our story. But grief isn't the whole story. It's just one part. Here's where we get to take the next step. That's shifting our perspective. This is the part of the journey where we stop seeing grief as an obstacle and start seeing it as part of our transformation. Now, to do this, we need to create emotional balance. When we're grieving, it's easy for our emotions to feel like they're spiraling out of control. One minute we're sad, the next we're angry, and sometimes it can feel like the emotions are just overwhelming. But emotional balance is key to processing grief in a healthy way. It doesn't mean pushing the emotions away or trying to fix them. It's about acknowledging them. Yes, I see that. I acknowledge that in this moment, I feel less than. I feel unworthy. That person, that way of response lifted up as a place of insecurity or rejection. I feel sad. I feel depleted. I feel scared. I feel afraid. Acknowledge the emotions that are coming as you are in this space. Because when you acknowledge the emotions and you have the emotional vocabulary, shout out to the feelings wheel, you are then able to do something about what you're experiencing. So emotional balance is about creating a space to process grief. And that is bringing balance to your life. It gives you the space where you can process grief. When we are everywhere And sometimes our life is just going to be like that. The emotions are going to just be like that. They're going to be overwhelming for us. But there are times when we have to come into this space where we have been able to just sit with it, sit with all the multitude of our emotions. When we are able to sit with it and see everything out of sorts and work by understanding and naming our emotions and bringing ourselves back to balance, when we're able to explore how does this thing, what is the story that we're telling ourselves? How do I need to be as I'm processing this? And commit to being that for yourself. It's a lot going on, but I know I need to be emotionally present to myself. It's a lot going on, but I need to do these things for myself so I can process. So it's the full capacity to be present to how you need to be for yourself in order to process what's going on. And then what do you need to do? What do you need to activate? What do you need to do so that you are creating the space for you to process your grief? As you're doing all those things and have that emotional balance, then you'll begin to have more things you can use to begin to tell your story. See, then you can ask yourself some more powerful questions to help you shift your perspective. What is true about my grief story, and what might be the illusion? What is true about my grief story, and what might be an illusion? Are there parts of your grief story that have been shaped by external expectations? What parts have been influenced by fear or shame? How can you rewrite those parts to reflect your truth? If we are able to develop a new story from here, it begins by really identifying what's your voice. What are the other voices that are informing how I'm telling the story? Is this coming from an external source? Are there external expectations? Am I telling the story this certain way because I really am in fear? I really am in shame. I'm sad about it. Are your feelings, which are really important, are your feelings dictating your story? And is it possible to rewrite those parts so that you get to your truth? What voice is speaking in my grief? Is it your voice? Are there other voices like society, family, or even past trauma that might be influencing you, how you feel and how you're grieving? Is it above and beyond you? Are you hearing all those other people, all of their expectations that you're going to get through this and that you're going to be fine, that this is just a bump in the road? Are they telling you that you're going to have to get over this? We don't cry. This part of our family, they give you the family name and they say, the Halls don't cry. The Smiths don't cry. The Browns don't do this. But that's really not your true story. So I want you to think about that. What is your own voice telling you? What might God's voice be? What does God say about your grief? We know that no matter the valley that we're in, no matter the mountaintop that we're on, that God is there no matter where we are. God is with those who are going through struggle, who might feel like they have been disinherited. God is still there. So if God is there journeying with you and championing for you to experience the best of life, then where is God in your journey? Where is God's voice? How are you making space for that? Oftentimes, we will create stories that says that God has been absent while we're going through our grief journeys, and we're trying to understand what is the voice of God. God is right there with you. There are many different ways of interpreting what has happened in your life. The loved one that you are lamenting and experiencing grief around could have had many different things that explains their end of life. As you're looking at your own medical diagnosis, there are many things that could explain where you are in your life. As you're looking at the loss of your job, there are many things that could explain it, and it may not be God alone. What is God's voice? What is God's voice that says, I will never leave you nor forsake you? What is God's voice saying to you right now? How does my grief archetype shape my perspective? Think about it. What is your grief archetype telling you? Do you know if you are a caregiver who wants to help others but might need to bend to your own grief first? That might need to tend to your own grief first? Are you a caregiver? Are you a sage? You want to do a lot of great reflection? Are you a seeker who is trying to discover and to be on this journey of self-discovery? Are you the one that is there to rescue everyone along the way? So I want you to take some time and get a tool I have on my website. If you'd like to visit it, it's called everydaygriefcoach.com is my website, www.everydaygriefcoach.com. And you can /assessments, and you'll be taken to a page that will help you to begin the process of taking the Everyday Grief Assessment. And once you've taken that assessment, you will understand where you are in terms of your grief personality, your grief archetype, and you'll get tools delivered to you so that you know how to explore that. I give you the ability to download a short booklet that helps you to uncover what your grief archetype might be suggesting as a path to healing and recovery. What are the things you can ask of your community in light of your grief archetype? And I invite you to explore how we might work with one another. That's down the road. Most important to me right now is that you get some of these tools that we've talked about in today's episode and then going forward. So I want you to know that grief is not just about moving through stages. That's oftentimes what we think. We think that there's a linear stage process that we have to go through in order to move through grief. And then once we get to the pinnacle experience, we're midway through, and that once we get to the end, oh, we finally have healed. I'm done with my grief journey. No, grief is about becoming. It's about transforming into someone more than you were before. And in that space in between, sometimes we call it that messy middle, where you're losing and you're becoming at the same time. That's where everything great starts to happen. It's where there's hope and there's strength. And hope and strength are growing in the most difficult part of your grief journey. When I was a kid, we used to go through the Holland Tunnel on our way to New Jersey to see our relatives. And I remember it would snake and move around, and it would be so dark, you could not even tell that there was brightness on the other side, that you were finally going to get to New Jersey. I want you to think about that. There is this part that it seems like you'll never get to the other side, but you will. And as you are in that place of anticipation of what's on the other side, which does not mean that the grief is still, that it goes away, that it dissipates. It's just that your life begins to get so big and that you've adapted so much to this reality of your life with the loss of what you once held to be most significant and loved. It begins to get so big that you're able to have the skill now to both grieve and live at the same time. So as you move through your grief, I want you to remember you are still becoming. Your story is yours, and it is powerful. When you understand your grief archetype, embrace the power of lament, and reclaim your agency, you will step into a new version of yourself, one full of hope, strength, and possibility. If you're ready to dive even deeper into understanding how grief shows up for you and how you can start reclaiming your narrative, I invite you to take my Grief Resilience Assessment. It's a tool to help you identify your grief archetype, understand your unique needs, and start healing in a way that fits who you are. Now, I said you can go to my website and you can download the tool by going to the assessment section of the website. And I don't want you to wait on this, because this is your next step toward healing. We've done a lot of work today. We talked about the power of your narrative, the power of lament, the power of community, the power of your story within each of those contexts. And when you utilize this tool, you'll have even more so you can engage your community and engage yourself so that you'll be able to create your own unique path to healing, because we all have a distinct way that we go through grief and healing. And this gives you some tools, some agency in doing that. And I want you to know that you don't have to be alone on this journey. I'm here to walk with you. This is Dr. Anitra, the Everyday Grief Coach, and I want to thank you for being here today. I hope this episode helped you to take the next step in your grief journey, one that feels true for you. You are still becoming. Thank you for tuning in to the Everyday Grief Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Until the next time, take care of yourself, trust the process, and remember, you're still becoming.